Welcome to Old Guys Still Rock. Super grateful you gave us a look or a listen. We specifically developed this podcast for friends or soon-to-be friends who are in the 40-plus category. This podcast is a platform to not only have your voices be heard, but also for others who are going through the same thing and know that they too aren't alone. Our topics may be business, topics may be entrepreneurship, our topics may be social, or our topics may be just everyday life. Whatever it is, we hope that you give it a share and leave us a comment. But most of all, if you want your voice to be heard, please leave us a comment on how to get a hold of you so you too can be an old guy that still rocks and help build our community. Until we speak again, stay safe, but most of all, God bless. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. If this is your first time here, you have just reached the world's best podcast that you have never seen before. I am Blair Armstrong of Team Armstrong Coldwell Banker. You can kind of see a little bit behind me. I am a global luxury specialist in the world of real estate here in the Coachella Valley. Coachella Valley, if you don't know where that is basically Palm Springs out to Coachella and everything in between from Palm Desert to Ranch Mirage. Look up Coachella Valley, you'll figure it out. On my very far right, I'm looking on my screen, is my good friend and co-host of this show, Brent Wright of Brent Wright Incorporated. He is a man with many hats. We've been friends for almost 30 years now. And so when I say man, many hats, he's kind of been building these businesses, actually even before a friendship, but wellness centers, business coaching to body shops, to payroll companies, property management. The list just keeps on going on. He's been on a board member of his church and his school. So again, it's taken a long way for him to cultivate those, but he's done it over time and really done them right. Today, we have a very, very special guest. Actually, he's in our backyard, my backyard of the Coachella Valley, Gary Scott, who is a realtor out here. I'm actually having a mind blank of what company you work for real quick, but I will get to that second. So Gary Scott, welcome. Thank you for being a part of our episode number 66 today, which we're going to call Leverage. So how are you?
I am sensational, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. And wow, Brent, that is a plethora of stuff. That's you, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. I appreciate it.
I also have a cattle ranch too.
Really?
Yeah. Full blown.
Wow. Well, that's my dream. All right. Have to talk about that.
Yeah.
So Gary, when stuff goes down and the zombies come, we're all going to Brent's house.
Yeah. And trust me when I tell you that we're prepared. My wife and I are
we're prepared. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
So Mr. Wright, how are you? What's been going on?
Day 39 on 75 hard.
Okay.
My son, they just started school yesterday, first day of school. I said, so do you want to go on our ruck in the morning? Of course. And he was tired last night. And I said, do you want to go tomorrow morning? And he said, of course. He had a little mini meltdown. And we use that now as leverage on him, talking about leverage.
Leverage, there we go.
Right?
Right.
I said, get your act together and let's figure out a trigger for you so that way you can get square emotionally when you're tired and that you're not able to be kind, be considerate, not lash out, say the right thing, do the right thing, all those things. But you're going to have to figure this out because a little bit on your own, because I can't have you doing these things and then expecting to be rewarded by going on a 2.5 mile ruck in the morning.
Yeah.
So he thinks this 2.5 miles is a reward.
Crazy, right?
Right. So change of mindset. When I was his age, if you had to walk 2.5 miles, I thought, I was being punished, and so his big thing last night was to get right with himself and to start thinking about triggers so that way he could go on this walk this morning. And on the walk, we of course do our Lord's Prayer, we do our IMs, and we started talking about the trigger, and we're still working through that. But he understands now that he needs to figure out a trigger to be able to get square with himself emotionally. And we talked about emotional triggers before, right? And so all these things are kind of aligning in my life, in my universe, in my world, to support me and my family. So this podcast isn't just outbound, it's inbound too. And I'm utilizing the things that we're talking about every week in my family. So that's what's been going on is a lot of school, a lot of things. We started yesterday at the school with 288 kids that showed up, and we actually were signing kids up yesterday to go to school today and tomorrow and the next, and Monday. And so likely we'll end up landing somewhere around that 300 mark, and then probably by Christmas we'll be at that 320 mark that we talked about before.
That's
So
crazy. What a dream that's coming to fruition, right?
Absolute blessing to my family and many others. So it's huge. And
Brent, sorry, I've watched a couple of your episodes, but I'm not familiar. What school is it that you're talking about?
So I'm the CEO and board president of a private Christian school, and we started out 4 years ago with 72 kids. And
that's awesome.
And the business.
And are you in the desert too?
No, we're in Eugene, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the business was bankrupt when I got elected to be on the board. And
wow.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, we just last summer we just approved a $2 million budget for the school.
It's pretty good, dude.
And we're self-supported. We have very few donations, and we have no grants from the federal government or anything like
You're
that.
Not going to get any either, so
right.
Don't hold your breath on that.
Yeah, they don't participate in religious organizations, right? So separation of church and state. So
there you go. So Gary, that's awesome, Matt. Brent, I just those of you who have been following this for now episode 66, kind of watched that how over the last year and a half that Brent and I have been doing this podcast. We've talked about this school, we've talked about this church a couple times, and just how it slowly evolved, and it just doesn't. And that's when I go back and I said earlier, kind of Brent is with many hats, but it's taken him many years to get to this point. But it's consistency every single day and using the tools that we talk about in this podcast to become better. For a lot of you who watch, we'll probably mention it, but I'll mention it now. This is Therapy Thursdays. We get deep, and sometimes we talk about some crazy stuff, but again, usually it applies to life. So before I get to the weeds of this and leverage, Gary, I just kind of, tell us a little bit about yourself, obviously in real estate. Maybe you want to share some things that are going on in your world. And you obviously, as I said, you have a podcast that's coming out, what that podcast pertains to and how we can help you grow.
Real quick, Nickel Tour, been in the desert since 1977. Real estate agent and broker for 35 years out here. Married for 28 years. My wife passed from cancer 10 years ago, which feels like yesterday. We have two boys. Christopher is my partner in our real estate company, and he is also running for the Palm Desert City Council because our family,
that's right. I remember that. Yeah,
gets involved. So
that's awesome.
So Chris is doing that. My son Zach is in the Air Force. He runs the K-9 at the Andrews Air Force Base, so he's pretty busy. Just moved to Maryland, hates it. I told him don't move to Maryland, but he had to go to get big influence. Remarried now, recently. I met a great gal, my best friend. We're met during COVID, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then my podcast, I started a podcast called Grief Pie, which was about sharing grief with men who've lost their spouses. But it was so freaking depressing and emotional. People just didn't want to listen to it, because we got very real with the feelings of losing a spouse. Anyway, so the new podcast is called What If You Could? And it's about possibilities. It's about people doing what they think they can't do and maybe making the changes that they've wanted to. And been fearful or whatever, coming through different things. So we're excited about it. It's just getting started, but thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, even that, Brent and I have talked about that. I want to say a couple of weeks ago, actually, maybe even, yeah, it's probably a couple of weeks because it feels like we always bring this up. But it's so much that men, when they go through grief or trauma and stuff like that, we become silos, right? And we internalize that stuff, and sometimes it comes out in different ways, from drug abuse to alcohol abuse to whatever, because we don't know how to release it. So understand where you started with, you kind of this grief thing. Yeah, probably depressing, but sometimes we have to talk about depressing stuff to help us get to the bottom spot. But now that you have this other, what if you could? It's a nice, great segue. It's another thing why interest me, and then talking to Brent about having you on here. You intertwine with our podcast a little bit. Is this exploring some ideas of not being stuck in a hole and not knowing how to get out? And if you could do this, this, and this, and that's why we feel like there's just not a lot of avenues for men, women, or even children at this time, is to find different avenues that actually give us a positive outlook, because we're just inundated with negativity, and you can't do this, and you're not the right class, and you're not making enough money, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, how are you supposed to succeed in this world with everything that's surrounding you right now? And that's very evident in the world of health. It's one of the reasons why Brent will probably explore that a little bit too with leverage, but it's why Brent and his wife got involved with wellness centers that they're starting to build up there as well. Is just, we got to find some different avenues, because we're just not getting that in our kingdom that we live in right now. So okay, that was a big pedestal, everyone, and I'm sorry about that long intro, but what I really wanted to get onto is what we want to, over the last couple of weeks, Brett and I, over episode number 64, which we talked about, are you being a supporting actor? And then last week we talked about creating conflict, and how creating conflict could actually be a positive. So this week, Brett and I, and now Gary, is going to be part of this, is going to tie this in. And how are we going to use these bullet points that we've come up with and leverage those to go out and take that? Remember when we talked, Brent, a couple of weeks ago about engaging, equipping, and empowering. And so when you brought up this thing about leverage, here we go. We've got 2 great episodes underneath our belt amongst 62 other ones before that, or 63 other ones before that. Now we have these tools. How are, let's start with you, Brett, and how are we going to take what we talked about over the last couple of weeks and help people leverage this to make that not only good for themselves, but helping to empower others?
So I'm going to start out on my soapbox a little bit.
Good.
And I'm going to call people out. So my biggest frustration is seeing people build a life that they don't have to escape from, which I love. Mm-hmm. And then checking out of life. They're not participatory in their community any longer. You build for 40 years, 50 years to get to a spot where you're the expert in your field. You've been successful. You've reaped the rewards of it. And then you just check out. And then you're not leveraging any of those skill sets, any of those mindsets, any of that success. And you're not helping anybody to stand as well. Right? So our job as leaders is, while we're standing at the top of the mountain, is to pull the next one up, right? Mm-hmm. And keep pulling. And then they pull the next one up, and they pull the next one up. Well, what happens if your leader just tops off the other side, just drops off? There's nobody up there to pull the next person up. Mm-hmm. So why would I take all of this effort and energy to grow, prosper, build, and then not leverage it in some way, and not help society leverage it in some way? Mm-hmm. And then my second soapbox is about, why is it that we are always so close to the prize, but never open the box? So I'll digress a little bit here. So I have acquaintances that are billionaires. The first thing I want to do is get close to them. And I want to leverage their knowledge, their understanding, because I want to be a billionaire. The reason why I want to be a billionaire isn't to have money. It's so I can make a damn difference in this world. The more money I have, the more leverage I have, and the more opportunities I have to serve. So why is it that people have a tendency to get close to people and have a... Yeah.
So going back to a bit, and I hear what you're saying about, is not taking control of that. And Gary, I'm going to ask you a question here a little bit, but I wanted to talk about what you just said there, Brent, is like, okay, I've gotten to the finish line and I'm just going to kind of like, I got to my mental finish line, right?
Right. My number,
or
whatever,
whatever it is. Like I hit what I want to do. I'm done. And I'm not going to do anything else. And now I'm just going to sit back on cruise control. And it doesn't matter if people pass me anymore. I feel like I'm at where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this a lot about, so I'm glad that you brought this back up. But we are not put on this to just stop. We're in a constant pursuit of perfection, always settling on excellence. And so chasing that and to stopping that, that's one thing that you just said in that little clip that you just did there, is that it drives you crazy. And I think there's a lot of that when you're so driven, it's very hard to watch other people not do the same thing when there's no time clock in your head. Like when this stops, I stop when I go see Jesus, right? That's kind of what you're talking about. So Gary, to you, what Brent basically just said, and then my recap on that is, what are some of the things? I mean, you got this podcast. Obviously, there was a calling for you to come out and get out there and start helping some other people. What are you doing to constantly chase that thing to like, I've accomplished a lot in my life. I've probably done very well in real estate. I've done a lot of other things. I've had, unfortunately, I lost my wife, but now I learned a lot from that marriage beforehand to now divulge into this new marriage that I have with this great partner that sounds like you found some great friends, best friends and stuff like that. How are you taking what you learned and making it better?
Well, I think the number one thing that Brent said was leadership. There's a massive void of leadership everywhere. I mean, locally, schools, communities at the very top, there's just no leadership. And so taking that aspect of it, it's like, all right, well, we can't just wait, like Brent said, right? We just can't wait for someone to put people up or wait for people to leave. So you have to start taking that. We've always had a calling in our family. My wife was always very involved. PTA president, treasurer, we did everything with the kids for the foundation. And so they're our next leaders as our children. But when I lost my wife and I went through a lot of the different things, I realized how many people are struggling in so many areas, like you mentioned, the drugs, the alcohol, sexual addiction, financial issues, gambling, massive amounts of stress, COVID exposed so much, and people don't even like each other. So I think for me, it's just trying to get people to open up and talk. That was the whole concept of what I wanted to do, and share all these experiences to people that I interview, like 85-year-old woman who jumps out of airplanes and ski bus when I'm 85 years old.
Perfect.
Right?
That's awesome.
And she was a corporate person forever and just said, screw it, I'm done with this, right? So I guess it starts with getting people to talk real, because social media has hidden everybody from being real. And when you're not real and you don't expose yourself, you can't heal. You can't open up. So I think that's kind of my mission. Get people to open up, get them to see that there's possibilities, get out from behind that social media keyboard, and also find some leaders. If you can't find a leader, become the leader.
Yeah.
Amen.
Brent, what say you on that, what Gary just said?
So, a couple things. that 85-year-old woman who's jumping out of airplanes, that's cool. That's awesome. The question that I would have for her is, how is she leveraging that? Is she using that as a tool to get other people engaged so that way they're using their strengths to, again, pull the next person up to the top of the mountain, right? And so for her, it could be something she could use it to say, like, look, you're never too old to keep doing cool, fun stuff, right? And just being out there, sharing your experiences, positives, negatives, sharing what you're doing, showing people that they can do as well. Before we had some technical difficulties, I was heading towards the direction of this. So why is it that we as humans typically will connect with somebody and feel like there's an alignment, but yet never ask them, how did you get here? What was your experiences? What were your failures? What were your successes? What would you do differently if you were to do it again, right? So what I was talking about is, I've got an acquaintance who's a billionaire. And one of these days I want to be a billionaire because I want to be able to impact this planet in such a way that it'll be life-changing for many, many people. And so in doing that and having that money and having that ability to make those impacts, I want to get there faster. I want the cheat. We talk about cheat codes on our podcast. I want the cheat codes. So if I have a billionaire that is in my circle, why wouldn't I try to sit down with them and get them to explain to me how they got there? Help me with the cheat codes. Help me get there faster. Help me make an impact faster, right? I see people that will literally have access to somebody who has so much knowledge and experience, and yet they don't take the 5 minutes of investment to say, can we go to coffee? Can we go to lunch? Can I hear what your experiences are? I know 30 people right now who know I have a podcast and that could use the information, and we've talked about it, and yet they don't listen.
Yeah.
I know 50 people who I've offered to do credit counseling, personal coaching for free, and they won't use that leverage that they have. They won't even reach out and say, I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's arrogance. I don't know if it's they don't realize that they're broken or don't have a problem. I don't know. I'm struggling. That's why I wanted to talk about this, is because I'm struggling to understand why people don't leverage the tools they have in their toolbox.
So Gary, what do you say on that, man? I have some stuff, but I want to hear kind of your stuff. What Brent just said is, why do you think that when you're giving wisdom, like Gary, obviously Brent sharing some wisdom just now, but when you're sharing some wisdom with the people that you surround yourself, what do you think is the biggest hurdle for, I mean, we're talking kind of about men and actually everybody really. What do you think is the biggest hurdle why people don't take wisdom, stuff that you've been through in life, and not take advantage of it and become better?
Good. People are afraid. People are afraid to expose themselves. They're afraid to ask. You know, it starts really young, don't ask, about people. But what I want to do with my podcast was I'm talking to normal people, right? It's like instead of chasing celebrities or trying to get that big player or trying to get someone in, it's just everyday people who's been through the stuff, right? And it's amazing when people get on. I have people that, oh, I can't talk for an hour, I never make it. But 2 hours later, they're telling us about, I'm an alcoholic. It's like, dude, I've known me forever. I didn't know, right? So as people, and then they just feel better as they expose themselves. Then they're able to share. And we all have heard a million times, if you feel really bad, go help somebody. You'll feel better about yourself when you help someone else. By like they were saying, by pulling them up. But I think people are afraid. People do not want to expose themselves out of fear of what people will think. and that's a disease almost, really.
It's massively debilitating, and I jokingly say that actually it's not joking, it's kind of for real, but I'm starting to learn some different stuff like this. Is actually Brent and I are kind of both in the same pod. We're both massive introverts. We do very well on this podcast, and people are like, God, you guys give so much good stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm an introvert, so this is therapy for us. But going back to what both of you said, and I think I think there's a little bit of ego. Most of us that watch this podcast, and so for you younger guys that are watching this, pay attention to this part. We have been raised in a society that we're supposed to have our big boy pants or our big girl pants on all time. And when an arrow comes through and pierces your armor, we're supposed to act like nothing happened. And I'm not saying to come out and be in this kumbaya rainbow vulnerability, but there is God made communication for a reason. There's ways for you to have a therapist for help. A lot of you who watch it know that I've done that. Most of us have gone through some sort of therapy to get through that. But another big thing what Gary said and Brent said on here, that's basically why we created this podcast. Is it scary to get in front of a camera? Oh yeah, it's not easy. Butterflies on this thing all the time, but when you get done with it, we haven't had one person leave this episode, or from Edna to Joe to all these different things to be on here. And even though that it may have been hard, it's like, I really like that. And stuff that comes out of these podcasts, which is normally would not come out of normal conversation, because it's the same thing what Gary said too, is, we'll be great keyboard warriors and stand and hide behind it, not have to show our face. But now when you put it in a real light, but realistically, when you're coming on here and you're doing this type of stuff and you're sharing, maybe even if it's in a coffee shop with 4 or 5 other people, sharing that stuff is empowering other people to know that, hey, it's okay. Are we the big white horse? Hell no, we're not the big white horse. I'm not coming to save you. We're just walking beside you like, listen, you're not alone doing this. And so using this, going back to what the topic is to talk about of leverage, using us as leverage to help you become better. Don't be a freaking pansy and say, I don't want to listen to what they're saying. Because, it's like I've already done that. Well, if you've done that, why are you in the rut? And listen, Brent tells me something new. He gives me stuff all the time. I've watched Gary over the last couple months through Facebook. He's given me some tools of how to act with different people where I want to put my hands around their neck and strangle them. He does it in silent. I do it verbally. Once in a while, guys, you're not going to believe this, especially after being a friend of mine for almost 30 years and all the accomplishments that he made. Once in a while, I give something that Brent learns.
Yep. And I'm grateful. Grateful.
I know this was a little bit of a tangent on all 3 of our parts of this, but as you guys, it's like, it's time to put down the shield. Yes, carry it with you, and you're going to need it once in a while. You're going to take a couple of arrows, but take some wisdom. And, Brent, I was just going through Proverbs this morning, and it talked about wisdom, and the people that shun it are fools, and the people that absorb it are wise beyond their years, right? I mean, there's so many different words. So sometimes I get on a soapbox, man, and I get lost after that. It's just like,
but that's another man thing, on the guy thing, and the road thing.
Yeah.
When we were doing the grief ball, it was 2 guys eating grief one bite at a time, and it was geared towards men who've lost their spouse, who passed their cancer, and how you were lost without your spouse, right? And letting down your guard, we'd cry, we'd scream, we'd do all this stuff. When we looked at the statistics, it was like 83% women watched the show of the 4 that watched it, and just a very small percentage of guys. And it's like, this show was geared towards men letting go, right? It's okay to let that go, that you are suffering because your spouse of only years has died of cancer and you're alone. It's okay to talk about trying to date again or have sex again or meet people again or just trying to share, right? Plus, men were not opening up. They just wouldn't do it. Now they'd call me privately and say a few things, but it's really tough for dudes to just let it go and get real. There's that barrier that they don't want to cross.
So you just brought up something like I love these conversations, by the way, because it makes me think about something. Because yeah, Gary, you're right. We have a pretty high contingent audience of women as well, and then I'm just thinking like, well, it's really easy for us to get behind the mic and we can talk about this stuff, especially when we have guests. Maybe that's the way that we can let down our guard a little bit and still be a man and talk to our ladies or people that care about us that are women to try to, and maybe that this is our way of telling them this is how I'm feeling without being emasculated, doing that stuff. So I don't know. I hope that you keep on doing what you're doing and get your guys on there. As I said, too, sometimes we get a little raw on this show. Sometimes that, it is what it is. But and again, sometimes we talk about business, but I'm really glad that Brent brought up the subject today about leverage. So, again, if you didn't watch episode number 64, go back and watch it. If you didn't watch episode number 65, go back and watch it. Hell, if you didn't, go back and watch all the 3 other episodes beside that. Go back and watch that. Don't be afraid to take 1 or 2 golden nuggets, because I promise you, there's at least 2 or 3 golden nuggets that will enhance your life. Why? Because it's enhanced our life, and we're sharing that wisdom. So, Brent, I've been on the soapbox for a little bit over these last couple of minutes. Anything that Gary and I have said that kind of touched you for a little bit, or something you want to expand on?
So hopefully this is okay, Gary, but pre-show we talked about your cancer. And I think, if it's okay, permissive to talk about it on here, but I think that you're using that as leverage to try and help others and to try to help yourself grow and heal through the process. Would that be accurate?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, when dealt a card like that, tend to introvert and tend to take a woe is me stance and go through the motions and feel alone and feel lost and feel all the emotions, and then don't leverage that experience and share it with others. I think that's something very important, and I'm very appreciative that you're doing that and that you're taking the opportunity to, as an OGSR, Ode
Yep.
Glyce is still rock, right? So to take the opportunity and the card you've been dealt and to turn it into a positive to try to make a damn difference. And I'm very much appreciative of that. And I appreciate having you on for this.
Mhm.
And so that way you can share it. So
Thank you. I talked to an author that he wrote a book called Scars and Strife, Mark Johnson. And so I wanted to read him about the book, but then I talked to him about the book. Because what he does in real life, a lot of the book was really about being in the world and the thing, but he's a huge advocate for PTSD. And there's an actual PTSD court, which I didn't know, for veterans who are suffering this, to try to get them out of the legal system and into a veterans helping system. Like, let's just not keep putting these guys in jail for being alcoholics or things that happen and deal with the PTSD and just putting them on the treadmill of treatment, right? And he's rocking rock. I mean, that dude is really going out and working with veterans with PTSD, because it's a massive challenge. But what we touched on was how much, post-traumatic stress syndrome there is in all of life, right? I mean, COVID exposed that. Financial issues expose that. What people are struggling with right now. So, I mean, when people have a leverage, when people have something like the billionaire, something that they are good at, have learned from or dominated from, to reach back, like Brent said, and lift people up with that. It was massive. And the reason people don't do it is a mystery to me. I don't know, like we talked about ego, we talked about fear, we talked about I don't want to bother anybody, I don't want to talk about it, whatever, but if we could get more, you guys with what you're doing is awesome. If we get more people to open up and share and reach out, man, we can make massive changes. It would really be beneficial, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm real big on positive conflict, as we talked last time.
Mm-hmm.
And when folks aren't doing the things, I'm real easy to call them out, and I call myself out. So, I have a number of staff here in our complex with the multitude of businesses, and any guesses on how many of them have signed up for our wellness center at a 80% discount, and their spouses get the 80% discount? Any guesses how many of them signed up?
I'm giving you 2.
Gary?
That's probably none of them.
You're right. 0. You are literally a 2-minute walk away from an opportunity to make a difference in your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Because we all know that exercise changes all of those pieces, right? It's not just me saying it. Listen to Gary Brecka. Listen to anybody that's out there that's really sharing a ton of information about how to make a difference in your world and your life and your day-to-day. And you're going to hear movement. My chiropractor says lotion is motion.
Mm-hmm. Motion is
You know,
lotion.
it's
Yeah.
funny when you
Yeah.
talk about
Exactly.
there's a couple of things that people don't want to talk about. Money, sex,
Yep.
and nutrition. Well, religion, but that's a
Yeah.
politics, religion, but that's, well, those are politics we know. But when it comes to the personal selves, right? Money, sex, and nutrition. And I've been preaching nutrition I'm 61, I've been preaching it for 50 years, right? I mean, I try to share the crazy drinks that I take and the supplements, the exercise, the medications, the things that I try to do and share it. And people are almost offended. You know, are you calling me fat? But, I mean, if the pants don't fit, yeah, you're fat, you know?
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
like, why is nutrition so taboo? You know, and I don't want to get into politics, but to listen to RFK Jr. coming out and really hammering on this right now is so inspirational. I mean, it's brought it to the forefront. I posted something, I could post a cat licking itself and get 100 likes. I posted something about the incredibly horrible food shortage problem, not food shortage, but hunger problem in this country, and no one gives a poop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's like the richest country in the world with the most food, and people are starving. 44 million people a day go hungry in America. 34 million. So they can't afford food. Don't talk about it. And the food that they eat is such garbage. It's so painful. It's so horrible for your soul and your fiber. And they don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, especially I mean, again, let's stay on that, because I think that's awesome, especially with Brent's what's doing with the wellness center. They're changing the culture around their area, especially in Eugene. It is what it is. But going back to it is, they have this guy that is now the outcast who has a very checkered life. And see, I think that's a bad thing about that, is you could have a very checkered life in the past. God knows, for all those of you know me for a long time, you know what my life was before. It wasn't good. I made a lot of bad decisions and stuff like that, and I lived a lifestyle that was not very healthy, and it is what it is. But you're painting somebody in the picture because they had a checkered life, and now they're coming out with all this information of what's not good and how to become healthier, and they're like, well, he's just a kook. And that's the bad part about this, is sometimes like people will come on and maybe do a podcast that have had the light shown on them, right? Like, oh my gosh, talking about leverage. I was here, and now I found here, and I want to be here now, and I'm going to show you how I got from this point to this point, what Brent and I and Gary are doing and sharing our wisdom for you is that we were there. We know what it tastes like. We know what we didn't like about it, and we wanted to help you prevent it. So regardless of what you know about us in the past, when's the last time you really got to know us recently? When's the last time that you really dug deep, pulled back the onion that we've come from? Not saying that, again, we're not the white horse. There's plenty of people better for us. What Gary is offering, what Brent is offering, what I'm offering, I'm sure there's a couple other people out there in this world they're offering is, here's an avenue to help you get better.
Yeah.
We may never see that until we go see God. There's a good chance that we will never see that. And remember that one time or that podcast that Gary did or that podcast that you and Brent did? Well, maybe that one time is like, that changed my life. Good. That's what we want. If we don't hear about it, great. If we hear about it, even better. But I think that's the big thing is sometimes is where we've come from. People will judge us from the past instead of the journey that we've taken to get better.
Yeah, just a couple
that's what I'm saying.
Just to bring it back to legislating, I'm sorry, I scroll a lot, but
that's right.
When Brent opened up with what he was talking about is about helping people up. And I always tell people, I'm like a rope. You cannot push a rope, right? It'll just bundle up. But if you pull a string, if you pull a rope, it gets in a straight line. It's easy to get where you want it to go, right? So it's so difficult to try to push someone to your knowledge or try to help someone. So you try to figure out a way to pull them gently with you to share some of your knowledge or maybe gently bring them to a place that will help them. So you think, well, with what you guys are doing and opening this up to people to say, listen, we're an open book, right? We're here to help. We want to pull you with us. We're not trying to push you in any direction or give you some sort of, ideas that you need to accept from us. But like you said, Blair, if we can offer you something to help just pull you a little bit along to something better from our knowledge, that's all we're really trying to do.
One thing to wrap it up, guys, we're getting into Joe Rogan time here, and I got another meeting coming soon. But to kind of wrap this up a little bit, probably, I can't remember, 18, 19, 20 episode, Blair, we talked about my mom saying, I wish I would have had somebody like you talking about the things that you're talking about when I was your age to help me get to a different spot. To hear that from your mom is super rewarding. That she sees that I'm trying to do something different, that Blair's trying to do something different, now Gary's trying to do something different than likely we experienced as we were growing up. And that's changing, that's bloodline changing. I can definitely tell you after seeing Blair's son grow up, because I've watched him since he was like this big, right? And that kid's changing his bloodline. Huge.
Absolutely.
He's created his own bloodline. He has 6 freaking kids. So, he kind of got his own kingdom, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
He's got a basketball team and 1 bench warmer right now. So
basketball leader and a cheerleader, which actually might become the GM.
There you go. So be the change that you are seeking and go make a damn difference. That's my final.
I love it. Well, it's not your final because I'm coming back to you. But anyway, Gary, how can we find you, man? So someone sees you like, hey, I really like what Gary had to say today. I like him better than I like these 2 yo-yos that have been doing episodes. How do we find you? Do we find you on Facebook? Do we find you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on everything. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. They put me all over the place. So basically, it's just a podcast called What If You Could. And I basically just interview everyday people. I've got a lot of experts on there, authors and stuff like that, benefits, but it's basically about just real people just talking about the challenges they've been through, what they've overcome, how they've moved forward, and to kind of inspire people that, hey, like a gal jumping out of a plane, just never too late. And you can make any change in your life that you want to. You just have to want to. So
Yeah, I
thank
love
you
it.
so much, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Love you having you on here. Any final thoughts for you, Gary?
You know, I don't catch people kind of place them at. I doubt if you had one final thought, but I'll tell you what. Mark Johnson, the author of that Scars and Stripes, left me with something that really shook me. And I said, what do you have a final thought to say? And he said, don't close that door. And I was like, you mean on life, on opportunities, or what he goes? He goes, it's a metaphor for a lot of things, but 22, service people commit suicide every day. And don't let them close that door. Because if they get behind that door and take out their uniform, start cleaning their weapon or something, that it's not going to end well. Leave the door open. And I just think that metaphor was so strong for me for everything. When I reach out to people and stuff like that, you guys are doing this, like you're leaving that door open. They might not come to you on episode 20, episode 65, episode 100, but at some point, you guys are going to say something that opened the door, and they're going to come to you guys, and it's going to be huge. You're going to change lives. So I just say what Mark said, don't close that door. Leave it open.
Thank you very much, man, for being on there. You guys, we're gonna let you get back on your life. Use these last couple episodes, especially 66, which is today, 64 and 65, which are the last couple of weeks. Go back and watch them, and tell us what your thoughts are of how those are going. How are you going to take those golden nuggets and leverage those to have a better life, not only for yourself but your family and your friends that are surround you. So, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for your continued following us. We're completely grateful. If you haven't done so yet, as always, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell on the YouTube and the Spotify channel, so when they come out, you know where to find us. But until we see each other next week, stay safe, but most of all, God bless, guys. Take care.
You